This is Olivia Kuhlman from the Crater FFA chapter with her speech entitled, Impressive or Not?
I remember my excitement when my grandmother and I arrived in Eugene, Oregon. As a little 11-year-old, I walked into the barn and saw the most beautiful quarter horse I had ever seen. Instantly, I fell in love, and I knew that he was the horse for me. Just gazing upon him, I could tell that he was the descendant of a legendary horse. But which one? April 15th, 1969 was a day that the Sorrel American quarter horse stallion Impressive was born. Impressive did, well, impressive things, for he had one of the most desirable conformations of the American quarter horse. He set the standards of the 20th century. Impressive had the petite, elegant head, the muscular, built body, and the small, dainty feet that many breeders aspired to. Due to this, he was a sire to over 2,200 foals, leaving today's number at over an estimated 100,000 horses living and breathing with his much coveted DNA. Impressive changed the game, for better and worse. What the owners of Impressive eventually discovered was that he carried a genetic defect, hyperkalemic periodic paralysis, or widely known as HYPP. According to the UC Davis Veterinary Genetics Laboratory, sodium channels are pores in the muscle cell membrane which control contraction of the muscle fibers. When the defective sodium channel gene is present, the channel becomes leaky and makes the muscles overly excitable and contract involuntarily. The channel becomes leaky when potassium levels fluctuate in the blood. This may occur with fasting, followed by the consumption of a high potassium feed such as alfalfa. Hyperkalemia refers to higher potassium levels in the blood. These high potassium levels affect the body's ability to properly contract muscles and for cell function to take place. When potassium fluctuation occurs, the muscle cells struggle to carry sodium ions across the membranes, also resulting in abnormal contraction of the equine's nerves. This results in a wide range of symptoms. Symptoms of HYPP include mild yawning and slight muscle tremors, to the severity of muscular heart failure. The equine's muscles seize up, causing them extreme pain and discomfort. A horse that experiences an episode will most likely struggle to breathe. The upper respiratory muscles cannot properly contract, resulting in rapid breathing and abnormal fatigue. An episode can last from 15 minutes up to an hour long, depending on the severity of the gene that was inherited. The worst part is that HYPP is easily inherited through Impressive's bloodline. HYPP is a dominant trait. Therefore, horses that are tested homozygous dominant and heterozygous are both affected by it. Equine tested negative do not carry this defect and can potentially prevent future generations from possessing HYPP if bred. Within the equine breeding world, there are people who breed horses that contain the more potent of the genetic defect, further expanding the amount of horses that are afflicted. Since HYPP is not a vision mutation and can take years to show symptoms within the horse, a test was needed. Thankfully, in 1992, a hair test was released that enables the owner to determine early whether or not their horse has HYPP. When the test was released, 4% of the American quarter horse population had HYPP. As of 2018, according to the American Association of Equine Practitioners, the number of horses living with HYPP hasn't decreased. It has been 28 years since the test was released. However, people are still breeding horses with the hyperkalemic periodic paralysis genetic code. In 1998, it was required by the American Quarter Horse Association, or AQHA, that a horse with an Impressive bloodline be tested for HYPP. However, it is not against any bylaws to show or breed a horse that possesses HYPP, whether they carry the heterozygous or homozygous gene. Granted, it is seen as an undesirable trait within the equine show world, but you may show a horse that possesses HYPP without penalty. Since it is not a visual mutation, it does not affect the horse's show performance, unless a muscle tremor happens to take place at the point of exhibition. Due to this, carrier equine are often shown, their owners gambling with a possible phenotypic response. When studs such as Impressive earn high degree awards, they are bred to expand the pedigree of a winning horse. But the genetics disease is still present and can be passed on to future generations. When born, equine are not required to be registered, entered into AQHA, or to be tested at early vet checks for any genetic diseases. If a horse is not registered, the rules of AQHA don't apply. In many cases, this doesn't matter, for there are many sound equine owners. But there are horses who are still capable of imparting the HYPP trait onto offspring because the pedigree has been diluted for many generations. If it becomes a requirement for quarter horses to be registered, then early detection of HYPP can occur, and the instances of accidental breeding of this genetic defect will decrease. A prestige show horse with an outstanding pedigree can be priced from $10,000 up to $30,000, some being priced at higher rates. But once they lose their ability to show, either from unmet show standards or health issues, that price drops exponentially. The financial value of the equine is subpar, thus hindering those who would breed genetically disadvantaged animals. HYPP needs to be brought to the forefront of the equine world, and the exhibition of horses with this genetic defect must be prohibited. Thankfully, even though my horse carries Impressive's DNA, Teddy tested negative. It does not affect him, nor would he have been able to pass it on to any of his offspring. Teddy and I were lucky. However, other heirs of Impressive are not as fortunate. We have the ability to breed high-quality animals and push the boundaries of genetics. But we need to start taking a step back from what we can do and look at what we should do. Thank you.
Olivia, if HYPP only affects such a small portion of the horse population, why should we be worried about it?
4% may seem like a small number, but when you take into perspective the amount of quarter horses that are in the world, that's a huge number. There are millions of American quarter horses living and breathing at this second. So when you take into account 4%, that reaches into 100,000 horses, even more. So even though it may seem like it only affects a small portion of the population, it actually affects many horses' lives. And in the long run, people who breed horses with a hyperkalemic periodic paralysis genetic code, they get passed on to other generations of horses because it's able to be passed on even if the other horse that was bred doesn't have HYPP, it's still able to be passed on in the future. It's not a recessive gene, it's a dominant trait. Therefore, like I stated before, they can pass it on to their offspring, which is important because people like to breed these quarter horses that have this beautiful conformation, because Impressive was a beautiful horse. So in the end, it can be expanded if it's not brought to people's attention.
Thank you. Olivia, when a horse displays these slight muscle tremors, are there any medical things that someone should do?
Most of the time when a person's horse experiences some type of medical issue, they call up the veterinarian. In many cases, people will most likely do this because they don't know what to do, so the veterinarian will end up giving them some fluids to dilute the amount of potassium in the blood, since their muscles absorb that of water. But really, the only thing that can really prevent these muscle tremors from happening is to take early precautions. Because a horse may experience a muscle tremor when they exhibit and they exert that amount of energy. Because the potassium and the sodium, it gets flowing through their muscles and through their blood and gets really spread out to their bodies. So when a horse that has hyperkalemia exhibits and they really, they eat all of the potassium feed, then they could probably most likely exhibit these muscle tremors. So the best thing you can do is just take early precautions, and so these muscle tremors don't happen in your horse. There aren't really many things that the veterinarian can do in the long run. So since it's a genetic defect, there are no vaccinations towards this, nothing of the sort. So really, it's just taking early care of what is best for the horse.